For 50 years, Bing Crosby and Bob Hope looked like best friends on screen. They made 7 road movies together and earned millions. But behind the cameras was a different story. When Hope was honored at the Friars Club, every Hollywood star showed up except one. Crosby was asked why he didn't come. His answer was brutal and cold. That moment revealed the truth about their relationship. What really happened between these two legends stayed hidden for decades. The real reason Crosby couldn't stand Hope had nothing to do with money or fame. Bing Crosby was born on May 3, 1903. In a small house his father had built with his own hands at 1112 North J Street in Tacoma, Washington. They named him Harry Lillis Crosby Jr., but no one filed the paperwork. The doctor forgot to register the birth. That one missing form would later cause decades of confusion, as Hollywood couldn't quite decide how old Bing Crosby really was. At home, things weren't easy. His father, Harry Lowe Crosby, worked as a brewery bookkeeper and made just enough to feed their large Irish Catholic family. With 7 children packed into that little house, there was barely space to breathe. When political shifts cost Harry Sr. his job as county treasurer in 1905, they were forced to move again, scraping together what little they had. In 1915, when Kate's father passed away, he left behind 14 grandchildren and almost no financial help. The family somehow bought a house for $850, but even that was a heavy burden. Harry Sr. had to take whatever brewery work he could find to keep them afloat. His mother, Catherine Helen Harrion, everyone called her Kate, was born in Stillwater, Minnesota on February 7, 1873, and carried music in her bones. Their 4-bedroom house was always overflowing, not just with kids, but with sound. She gathered all 7 children around a worn piano and taught them folk songs, filling the cramped rooms with harmony. Bing shared his bedroom with 3 brothers, Larry, Everett, and Ted, where noise and chaos were part of daily life. They couldn't afford many records, so Bing would play the same ones over and over again, whistling along with Edison phonograph tunes and trying to copy Al Jolson's voice. Kate also worked at a dry goods store just to bring in extra income. She juggled shifts and children while holding the entire house together with music and faith. In 1906, the family left Tacoma and moved to Spokane when Bing was only 3. They rented a house at 303 East Cinto Avenue before finally building their own home at 508 East Sharp Avenue with the help of Harry Sr.'s brothers. Even with 2 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms, it still wasn't enough for a family of 9. Harry Sr. found bookkeeping work again, this time with Inland Brewery and Malting Company, but money was still tight. Bing attended Webster Elementary School, though he often skipped class. One day, he and his friends were caught stealing cinnamon buns and throwing them at cars. At just 8 years old, he spent a night in juvenile detention. That brush with trouble didn't scare him straight, but it gave him a story he would never forget. Sundays were spent serving as an altar boy at St. Aloysius Church, where Catholic discipline was strict and unforgiving. At home, life was loud. At church, it was silent. The contrast shaped him. He graduated from Gonzaga High School in 1920. In school, he joined elocution contests, recited Robert Service poems, and debated like a natural performer. To pay for jazz records, he worked every job he could find, delivering newspapers for the Spokesman Review, picking apples, working logging camps, cleaning brewery offices, and folding props at the Spokane Auditorium. He started working there in 1917 at age 14, and it changed everything. That was where he first saw Al Jolson perform live. Bing called it electric. He also played baseball for the Spokane Ideal Laundry team, not for glory, but for extra cash. In 1921, while attending Gonzaga University, he joined a group called the Musicalators. They played local dances and parties. Suddenly, Bing wasn't just a kid from a crowded house anymore. He was a voice people listened to. But underneath the music, there was something else. A family myth passed down like gospel claimed they were descended from Thomas Prince and Patience Brewster of the Mayflower. His brother Larry even traced them back to a Yorkshire constable from 1204 named Gulf Rides Drosabe. They talked about aristocracy, but they lived in poverty. Bing later admitted the gap between who they said they were and how they actually lived gave him an inferiority complex that never went away. He didn't even have a birth certificate. Church records would be the only proof he existed. That confusion over identity made him hungry for more, for better, for applause. He was supposed to become a lawyer. But by 1925, in his final year at Gonzaga, Bing dropped out. His grades had slipped from B's to F's. The Musicalators were paying him more than his part-time law clerk job ever could. He was sneaking out at night to jazz clubs like the Pekin Cafe, soaking in the sound of McKinney's Cotton Pickers and the original Dixieland Jazz Band. He was leading a double life, mass on Sunday mornings, speakeasies on Saturday nights. His mother was devastated. Family friends begged him to go back. He didn't. In 1923, Bing, Al Rinker, and Al's sister, Mildred Bailey, formed a small act called Two Boys and a Girl. They played for $75 a week at the Pekin Cafe, more than enough for Bing to quit law for good. His nickname came from a comic strip called the Bingville Bugle. A neighbor called him Bingo from Bingville, and it just stuck. They performed at Doc Clemmer's Theater, slipping jazz and scat into their act, which scandalized local audiences. Spokane wasn't ready for Catholic kids mixing black music into white shows, but they kept playing anyway. Then, in October 1925, Bing and Al packed up a beat-up 1916 Model T Ford and drove 200 miles to Los Angeles. It took them 3.5 weeks. They averaged 200 miles a day, sleeping in one hotel room to save money, sneaking the second person in after dark. When they got to Hollywood, they crashed on floors and sang on sidewalks for coins. Bing worked as a soda jerk when he wasn't auditioning. On his first night in Hollywood, he got spectacularly drunk at Jane Jones's speakeasy in the hills. He would never forget the rubber legs. That week, they stayed with Mildred Bailey, got harassed in Tijuana, and took a terrifying $3 airplane ride that gave Bing a lifelong fear of heights. For the rest of his career, he always asked for hotel rooms on the lower floors. In 1926, things got worse. One talent scout said he looked too Irish, and that his voice sounded like a cat in heat. No studios wanted him. Casting directors spent over $70,000 testing him, but no one signed him. His ears stuck out. His voice was too soft. He drank even more. His brothers sold trucks on the side, sometimes used for bootlegging, and that money helped him survive. Meanwhile, electrical recording was changing everything in the music world. Soft voices like Bing's suddenly worked, but he didn't know that yet. Later that year, Bing and Al landed a gig with Fanchon and Marco's Vaudeville Revue. It paid $75 a week each. They performed 4 shows a day, 5 on weekends. But not everyone liked it. Their use of black music styles like scat and barrelhouse jazz upset white audiences. Theater managers got complaints. Some venues even asked them to tone it down. Their songs, China Boy, Copenhagen, San, were bold. They performed with dancers Doreen Wilde and Bobby Thompson, and that interracial collaboration stirred even more controversy, but it also got them noticed. In late October 1926, Paul Whiteman's orchestra caught their act in Los Angeles. Whiteman didn't fire them even when theater managers said to. Instead, he added pianist Harry Barris and turned the duo into a trio, the Rhythm Boys. Their 1927 hit Mississippi Mud changed everything. Recorded with cornet legend Bix Beiderbecke, it made Whiteman the king of jazz. Bing, Barris, and Rinker suddenly had a sound that everyone wanted. They recorded I've Got the Girl and toured with Whiteman across the country. In January 1927, they performed at the Paramount Theater in New York. Bing was now earning $200 a week and singing for millions on radio. Songs like From Monday On and What Price Lyrics became bestsellers. But fame didn't erase the darkness. Bing drank too much. During the filming of King of Jazz, after an argument, he drove a woman home and crashed into another car. Both were thrown over the windshield. She was bloody and unconscious. He was arrested and locked up in Lincoln Heights jail. Whiteman pulled strings to get him out. The next day, Bing showed up at the studio in handcuffs. Because of that arrest, he lost his solo number in King of Jazz. Song of the Dawn went to someone else. He still appeared in group songs like Happy Feet, but it wasn't the same. The movie cost nearly $2 million, but only made back $900,000. It was released just after the 1929 stock market crash and flopped hard. Whiteman had to fire 10 band members and cut salaries by 15%. But Bing kept going. He remembered Whiteman's 1924 concert at Aeolian Hall, where George Gershwin debuted Rhapsody in Blue. It was meant to prove that jazz could be serious music. That concert gave Whiteman the crown, but it made Bing feel like an outsider. Gershwin's genius overwhelmed him. He wasn't part of that world yet, but he knew he would be. And by 1930, he would leave the Rhythm Boys behind to become something bigger. He would become Bing Crosby. On September 2, 1931, Bing Crosby signed a CBS contract that paid him $1,500 a week to sing for 15 minutes every night except Sunday. Just days before, he had paid $7,500 to break out of his smaller $250 a week deal with the Ambassador Hotel. He showed up to the studio with a sore throat and laryngitis, missed the first show, and within hours people started whispering that maybe the West Coast crooner had frozen up or passed out drunk. But 2 nights later he went live with Eddie Lang on guitar and Victor Young's orchestra behind him. The voice was tired but different, low and easy, and it felt close. Like he was whispering right into the room. His theme song, Where the Blue of the Night Meets the Gold of the Day, played softly each night before he sang. And even though his show pulled only a 6.9 rating compared to Rudy Valley's 24.7, CBS had found something new. By 1932, Bing's brother Everett had already negotiated a better deal with Chesterfield Cigarettes for $2,000 per week. The crooning era had started, and Bing Crosby was at the center of it. Hollywood moved fast. In 1932, Paramount gave Bing his film debut in The Big Broadcast, where he sang his own theme song and shared the screen with George Burns and Gracie Allen. His relaxed style worked just as well on camera as it did on the radio. The studio locked him into a 3-year, $300,000 contract, and just like that, Bing Crosby became one of the most bankable stars in the country. In Going Hollywood, released in 1933 with Marion Davies, he was paid $2,000 a week above his regular salary. Because Davies worked so slowly, the shoot ran long. By the end, he'd earned $75,000 on that film alone. Time called him probably the world's best-paid male singer. He spent his days on golf courses and his nights at parties soaking in the attention, the alcohol, the money. His salary jumped from $1,000 a week to $5,000 per film. It looked easy, but cracks were forming. In 1936, during the filming of Pennies from Heaven, Bing started showing up drunk to rehearsals. He'd put his own money into the Columbia Pictures production, but behind the scenes he was distant and moody. The director watched him stumble through scenes. Crew members whispered. The public never saw any of it because the title song became a hit, holding the #1 spot for 10 straight weeks. But the drinking never stopped. Years later, he would warn his son Gary to stay away from alcohol, saying bluntly, "It killed your mother." By 1942, he was starring alongside Fred Astaire in Holiday Inn, a film that pulled in $375 million and introduced the world to White Christmas. The song had been written by Irving. Berlin in January 1940, and when Bing first sang it on Christmas Day in 1941, on the Kraft Music Hall, he didn't think much of it. He recorded it quickly, just 18 minutes in the studio. "I don't think we have any problems with that one, Irving," he said casually. But it would become the best-selling single of all time, with Crosby's version alone selling more than 50 million copies. The total across all recordings eventually topped 100 million, generating over $100 million in royalties. Berlin kept the writing credit and the checks, but Crosby took the fame. The song made him untouchable, but radio was still his kingdom. NBC forced him to perform twice every night, once for the East Coast and again for the West, because they didn't allow pre-recorded broadcasts. In 1945, burned out, Bing walked away from Kraft Music Hall, triggering a 7-month legal fight that cost him $500,000. Then came Jack Mullen, a former Army major who had smuggled Nazi Germany's magnetophone tape machines back to the U.S. These devices could record sound perfectly on magnetic tape. Mullen demonstrated the machine for Bing, and he was stunned. He invested $50,000, worth $1.1 million today, in Ampex, a company no one had heard of. On October 1st, 1947, Crosby's show aired as the first radio broadcast using magnetic tape. That single broadcast not only saved Bing's career, but quietly launched Silicon Valley. Ampex would go on to create hard drives, videotape, and the backbone of modern data storage. Still, not everything he touched turned peaceful. His rivalry with Rudy Valley had been simmering since the 1930s. Valley had once ruled the airwaves, the original crooner. Warner Brothers even made a cartoon called Crosby, Columbo, and Valley, mocking the 3 biggest radio heartthrobs. Bing's voice was cooler, more casual, and more intimate, and he slowly started winning. By 1940, Crosby had left Valley behind, recording 38 #1 hits that decade. His voice shaped a generation. Even Louis Armstrong began adjusting his style for the microphone, following the path Bing had carved. He wasn't doing it alone. Bob Hope had been part of the journey from the beginning. They met in 1932 at the Capitol Theater and clicked instantly. Their banter felt improvised and sharp, the cool singer and the cowardly wisecracker. By 1938, Hope was a guest on Bing's radio show. It worked so well they turned it into the road movie series, blending jokes, music, and rivalry. But even in those early days, there was distance. Hope hated that Bing made more money. Crosby preferred the company of Phil Harris. When Hope was roasted at the Friars Club and Crosby didn't show up, Hope took it personally. They worked together for 50 years, but they were never close. Behind the music and movies was an empire. In 1936, when the top tax rate hit 91%, Crosby set up Bing Crosby Limited, a shell company that let him funnel his earnings through a lower corporate tax rate. He sold his own talent to the company at a discount, then had it pay his expenses, travel, investments, even oil ventures as business costs. By 1937, the model was perfected. Sinatra, Joan Crawford, and others quickly copied it. He wasn't just a singer, he was the architect of Hollywood's tax dodge era. After the Depression, he and Bob Hope rolled $40,000 into West Texas oil wildcatting and turned it into $5 million each. The 1926 oil depletion allowance meant they paid no taxes on 27.5% of their profits. Even the dry wells could be written off. If you were rich enough, failure didn't cost you anything. By the 1950s, Bing's wealth had grown to $130 million. At his death in 1977, his estate was worth $150 million, more than $1 billion today. He spent it well. In 1937, he helped launch the Del Mar racetrack, writing off his horse breeding costs as business deductions. He bought a French chateau-style mansion in Hillsborough with 11 bedrooms, antique paneling from William Randolph Hearst's collection, and a grand piano that had starred in high society. He held on to the estate for 60 years. In 1946, he bought 25% of the Pittsburgh Pirates for $250,000, holding the stake until his death. When the team won the 1960 World Series, Bing was so nervous he couldn't even watch Game 7. But no matter how far he went, home was never peaceful. He married Dixie Lee in 1930. She was more famous than he was back then. Within 6 months, she filed for divorce, citing mental cruelty. They reconciled after he flew to meet her in Tijuana, but the damage was never fully repaired. They had 4 sons, Gary, Dennis, Philip, and Lindsay. Gary later said his father weighed him every week and beat him if he'd gained a pound. The nickname was Bucket Butt. Beatings came often with a leather strap. Gary said he used to dream of killing his father. Philip admitted he was beaten too, even if he stayed quieter about it. After Dixie gave birth to twins in 1934, her drinking worsened. Old photos show signs of fetal alcohol syndrome. As Bing's career soared, he was rarely home. The boys raised themselves while their mother spiraled. In 1947, Hollywood released Smash Up, The Story of a Woman, a thinly veiled portrayal of Dixie's descent. She died in 1952 from ovarian cancer just before her 41st birthday. The aftermath was brutal. Dennis committed suicide in 1991. Lindsay shot himself in 1989 after his inheritance vanished. Gary died in 1995 from lung cancer. Only Philip lived long enough to receive the trust money. When Bing remarried in 1957 to Catherine Grant, who was 23 when he was 54, the gap drew headlines. They had 3 children together, but Bing cut his older sons off from access to their inheritance until age 65. How much trouble will they be able to get into then? He'd said. Only Philip lived long enough to find out. Bing Crosby's voice comforted millions, especially during the war when he sang to the troops and sold millions in war bonds. But behind the soft tone and easy charm was a businessman, a fighter, a man building walls around himself as fast as he built his empire. He changed radio. He saved television. He launched Silicon Valley. He sold 100 million records, but he couldn't hold a family together. And in the end, the man behind the microphone left behind a legacy full of music, money, and silence. It started on a summer day in 1932 when Bob Hope was walking through the streets of New York and ran into a young Bing Crosby. It didn't seem like much at the time, just a casual meeting between 2 entertainers on different paths. But that December, they found themselves working together at the Capitol Theater. Bing was already a big name, making nearly $300,000 in record royalties by 1942 alone. Hope had been hired to MC Bing's show. They tried out an old vaudeville routine about 2 farmers bumping into each other on the street. The crowd laughed. The timing clicked. Their chemistry came naturally. But it wasn't the beginning of a great friendship. Not yet. After the show, Bing went back to Hollywood. Hope stayed in New York. They didn't work together again for 5 years. Their paths crossed again in 1938 at Crosby's racetrack in Del Mar. Paramount executives happened to be there and saw them joking around. The connection was still there, and this time the studio took notice. A film script called Road to Mandalay had been sitting on a desk. It was originally meant for Burns and Allen, then Jack Oakey and Fred McMurray, but after seeing Hope and Crosby together, Paramount knew who they wanted. That script eventually became Road to Singapore. Road to Singapore hit theaters on March 14, 1940, and it exploded. It became the highest-grossing film of the year with $1.6 million in US and Canada rentals alone. But behind the jokes and songs were salary fights that never really stopped. Crosby made twice as much as Hope, and by 1942, Bing was getting $300,000 from Paramount, not counting the money from his records. Hope kept smiling through the scenes, but the pay gap hit him hard. He felt like an equal on screen, but his paycheck told a different story. Even as the film earned $3 million worldwide and sequels were planned right away, the tension over money never went away. Hope kept pushing for par. Crosby kept using his fame to stay one step ahead. When they made Road to Morocco in 1942, everything boiled over. The movie pulled in $3.8 million, but the set was chaos. Hope had his own team of writers. So did Crosby. They fought over punchlines, rewrote scenes, and clashed in front of the crew. One fight over script changes got so heated that Hope walked off the set. He felt Crosby was stepping on his timing, taking more than his fair share of the spotlight. The tension didn't stop when the cameras stopped. When they did live radio together, Hope refused to rehearse with Crosby. Millions listened while backstage, Hope was alone, scrambling. The chemistry on screen was real, but it came from a place of rivalry, not friendship, and it was starting to crack. By 1947, the cracks had become clear. Hope finally renegotiated his contract and forced Paramount to pay him the same as Crosby for Road to Rio. They both received matching contingent salary deals. It should have been a victory, but Crosby didn't like being seen as anyone's equal. He saw Hope's push for fairness as a threat, and that resentment never left. Things reached a breaking point when Hope was honored at the Friars Club in the late 1940s. It was supposed to be his big night. Every major star showed up: Milton Berle, George Jessel. Over 100 Hollywood legends came to toast him, but Bing didn't. Hope looked for him, scanned the room. Nothing. Later, when reporters asked Crosby why he hadn't come to honor the man he made 7 films with, his answer was short: "I wasn't hungry." That line stayed with Hope for years. He wanted recognition. Crosby didn't care. Then came the radio broadcast in 1949. They were supposed to rehearse. It was live. Timing mattered, but Crosby didn't show up until the last minute. Hope had to wing it. The show went on, but the damage was done. Crosby's message was clear. He didn't need Hope, not to rehearse, not to shine. Hope was hurt, embarrassed, and increasingly bitter. Crosby made things look easy. Hope had to fight for every laugh, every dollar. The gap between them wasn't just money. It was pride. By the time they made The Road to Hong Kong in 1962, the feud spilled into casting. Crosby wanted someone younger. He demanded Joan Collins replace Dorothy Lamour, who was 48 at the time. Lamour had been part of every film, helped earn the series over $20 million, and was beloved by fans. Hope fought hard to keep her, even threatening to leave the project. But the decision had already been made. Lamour found out through the press. She called the producers herself. The compromise: a small role, a song called Warmer Than a Whisper. But it wasn't the same. The movie made just $2.6 million, the lowest of the series. The spark was gone. People thought Crosby and Hope were best friends. They laughed together on screen. They traded jokes like old pals, but off-screen they lived in different worlds. Dolores Hope once said, "They lived entirely different lives, but they respected each other. Their wives never socialized. Outside of charity golf events, they rarely saw each other." Crosby liked quiet dinners. Hope wanted parties. When the Friars Club honored Hope again, Crosby didn't come. Hope noticed. Hope always craved friendship. Crosby just wanted space. He hunted with Phil Harris, invited friends to his home in Northern California. Hope was never invited, not once. Even after decades of working side by side, their wives had never shared a meal. Hope kept reaching. Crosby kept pulling away. Behind closed doors, things were worse. Crosby called Hope a talentless hack to others. Hope later told his biographer he sometimes detested Bing. The famous joke, "There's nothing I wouldn't do for Bing and nothing he wouldn't do for me." That's how we go through life, doing nothing for each other, wasn't really a joke. It was the truth wrapped in a smile. Their last years showed how deep the divide ran. Bing died on October 14, 1977, after a round of golf in Spain. He was 74. Hope's tribute was short. He was a great partner. That was all. Hope still had shows to do. He went on stage days later. His team said he was too upset for interviews, but something was off. The warmth was missing. The pain didn't end with Crosby's death. His family unraveled. His son Lindsay committed suicide on December 11, 1989, after losing his inheritance to bad oil deals. Another son, Dennis, shot himself with a shotgun in May 1991, just weeks after his divorce. The smiles from the road films faded, replaced by tragedy. The 7 films they made together earned over $20 million and changed comedy forever. They broke the fourth wall, made fun of themselves, and set the template for buddy comedies for decades. But the friendship audiences believed in never existed. It was business. It was competition. Hope admired Crosby's talent and success. He even learned to invest like him, becoming one of Hollywood's richest men. But Crosby never let him in. Hope later admitted, "You know, I never liked Bing. He was a son of a..." Still, he chased his approval for decades. When Crosby died, Hope said all the right things, but there were no tears. Behind the perfect timing, the catchy songs, and the roaring laughs was a partnership held together by contracts, not connection. Their legacy became one of the greatest performances Hollywood ever pulled off, not on screen, but off. Two men who looked like best friends while quietly wishing they didn't have to share the spotlight.